How are we feeling this morning? Everyone awake? Alive? Need some coffee? Open up your Bibles to John chapter 18. John chapter 18. John's in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Use your table of contents up front if you need to. John chapter 18. So we're going to be, for most of today, those of you who haven't had the pleasure of getting to meet yet, or even if you haven't been here when the times I've been here, which is not every week, we've been studying through this series that we've called F.O.O.L.S Rush In. And we've taken we've kind of been studying the life of the Apostle Peter, as you talked about this already this morning and read from one of the letters he wrote. And we're kind of taking his story and kind of going through some different events throughout his life, kind of looking at his, not just his character, but his faith, and what we can learn from that in our own faith, in our own relationship with Jesus. And so we've talked about a couple different, we've taken each letter of the word fools and using it as an acronym to kind of talk about distinguish a different point of his faith. So we recognize the kind of the fearlessness of Paul, or of Peter. And then we talked about you want to know what the last one was? Observant. He was observant. Okay, that was the first O. Now, before I share this, before we get into the third one too, let me ask you a question. Have you, I'm surely not, but have you ever let your emotions get the better of you? Yeah? Or led you to say something or do something that maybe you wish you wouldn't have? My kids are really good at this. I remember I was playing catch with my oldest daughter, Naomi. And she was 7. This was last year. She was 7, playing catch in the backyard, ball and glove, and she's trying to learn how to play catch. And I always grew up playing baseball, love it, my favorite sport by far. And so to be able to share in those kinds of things is really special for me, to be able to play catch with my daughter. So we're playing catch, and we started with a tennis ball, kind of worked our way up to a baseball, and we didn't go very far. But we're playing catch, and about like every second or third ball she would drop and hit her glove and it'd fall out, or she would just miss it entirely and just look real uncoordinated. And then there was one time that the ball hit her glove and then it hit her in the face. I know, this is like the 8th time that she didn't catch the ball, and this one finally hit her in the face. So she's like, you can tell her emotions are starting to build. Then the ball hits her, and then she's feeling physical pain, and then her emotions boil over, and she starts crying, and then she starts leaving and walking inside. And right as she turns around and starts walking back toward the house, I said, Naomi, hold on. And I came over to her, and I said, honey, you're terrible at this. No, I didn't say it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But thought it. No. No. But it was a good reminder of that. And of course I can pick on my child, but we do this where it's easy to allow our emotions to boil up to lead us to do something that it is reactive because of how we're feeling. And I think what happens today happens to all of us. I mean, we could talk about example. We could pull, each of you could pull up your Facebook right now and show me an example of someone probably at the very top of your Facebook feed that responded or reacted out of emotion, right? It's naturally, humans, I think we are given toward allowing our emotions often to control us rather than the other way around. I think part of that is because we live in a culture where we are a culture where people really need and enjoy and pursue comforts. We don't like hard things. We don't like being uncomfortable. And controlling our emotions is uncomfortable work. It can be hard to grow in that. See, the problem is, it's not just about whether you have a high emotional intelligence or not. And it's not just about whether you're good at controlling your emotions or not. The problem is, if you give yourself to it, your emotions, how your feelings can become your God. And they do for many people. They can decide for you what kind of person you're going to be and how you are going to act in certain situations. I'm not saying emotions are bad at all. I'm not saying get rid of them. That's impossible. God created emotions. He created us to have them. That's not what I'm saying. The heart of what I'm saying is this. Your emotions, if you're not careful, can become your God. Because a God is a thing you choose to obey as your highest authority. And for much of this world, too many have chosen to obey their emotions rather than their Creator. So today, we're going to look at a story where Peter finds himself at this very crossroads. If you're unfamiliar with Peter, he's one of Jesus' very closest followers. Spent a lot of time with him in his ministry, learned from him, watched him, observed him. And at this story we're going to look at, Peter has a choice to make. Will he choose to be, I'll give you the second O, obedient to his emotions, or will he choose to be obedient to his Lord? So that's the second O, obedient, if you're a note taker. We're going to be in John 18, okay? Verse 1 is where I'm going to begin. When he, Jesus, had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who was another one of Jesus' followers, his disciples, now Judas, who betrayed him, knew that place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" Okay, now try to picture this scene. This is right after the Passover meal, this Last Supper he shares with his apostles, right? And many of you know the events that happened at that dinner, right? And afterwards they leave, and Judas is already gone. He left earlier to kind of go run an errand, and so Jesus, then they leave the meal, and he leads them into the garden at the night, right? And this is not just like some like a vegetable garden. This is they're in like this very heavily wooded olive grove. At the same time, it's Passover, so you can envision probably this full Passover moon really lighting up the place. It's probably well lit for the most part. What's interesting is these guys were experiencing what we even talked about already earlier, where they were praying, and then they suddenly woke up because they fell asleep. And this happened several times with them. But this time when they woke up, they were jolted awake to the sound of probably about 200 plus soldiers marching through the heavily wooded olive grove with lanterns and torches. And on top of like being jolted awake to that kind of sound of marching soldiers, trained Roman soldiers, coming out to look like they're about ready to attack, the disciples are kind of wondering, what is happening? And then Jesus goes out to them. And he says, "Who is it you want?" Interesting question, because it just said, Jesus knows what's about to happen. Jesus knows who they want, right? But what he's doing is he is setting the stage for this response. Verse 5 says, "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. And Jesus said, "I am he." And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back, and they fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. And Jesus answered, "I told you I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." His apostles, his followers. Fascinating story. This detachment of soldiers, probably about 200 of Rome's best trained soldiers. They know how to fight. They're ready for war. And at the sound of Jesus saying, "I am he," these soldiers fall to the ground. Talk about authority, talk about power. So the question is, what's happening here? How did they all of a sudden lose their balance together in unison? What's going on? There's a statement here. In our English translation, we say, "I am he." Now, for those of you who are here with us the past few weeks as we've been in the series, we've heard this phrase before. We've heard Jesus say this. The very first study of Peter, we talked about how Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water. And then there's this phrase that Jesus says, right? He says, "Take courage, for it is I." Don't be afraid. And he says, "It is I." In the Greek, it's ego eimi. When transliterated is I am. Now, why that's so powerful is because this is the exact name God, the Father, the creator of the cosmos, gave himself when speaking to Moses thousands of years before this. Moses said, how should I tell people you are? And God says, I am the I am. Jesus now in this moment, once again, is taking that upon himself, proclaiming the name of Yahweh, the I am. And at his name, they all fall. And I can't help but wonder what Peter is thinking at this moment. Because it's clear from what happens next that he still, God bless his heart, still doesn't totally understand Jesus' entire mission. Okay? Let's look at verse 10. It says, "Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear." John adds this little note, the servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Now, what's interesting about this story, aside from Jesus' closest disciple chopping a man's ear off, is that all four of the gospel stories, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and now we're in John, all four of them tell this same story. That's not common, actually. There's very few stories that show up in all four of them. Okay? This is one of the few stories that do this. However, John here is the only one that mentions it was Peter that did it. As if he's going out of his way to let you know, it was Peter. You guys love him. But he's once again pointing out the foolishness of Peter. He once again shows us he seems to be a fool who rushes in. Now, I want you to try to imagine Peter's emotions at this point. Okay, we haven't talked about the Last Supper really much, and if you're unfamiliar with the story, it's okay, just track with me for a second, but Peter was probably experiencing a few different things. Several emotions are going on at the same time. One, you can probably envision he's maybe gone through the emotion of insecurity. I mean, just the evening before at the meal, Jesus had told Peter, they're going to have this Last Supper together. He says, "Peter, I want you to go prepare the meal. I'm going to hang out with everyone else. You go prepare the meal," right? And then at this meal, Peter comes in, and Peter then, when he gets ready to sit down, Peter finds that everyone else is already sitting down, including Judas is the one who's sitting next to Jesus. So now Peter, who's been trying to really show Jesus that he wants to be next to him in all situations, finds he doesn't even have a seat next to Jesus at the table. Then he's also probably experiencing the emotion of confusion. Because now here in this olive grove, his master, or at the dinner table, first of all, his master, who's supposed to be the Messiah, the king, he gets down from the table and then he washes Peter's feet and everyone else's feet. So he's probably a little confused on what's going on. And then also at that dinner table, he's probably experienced a little bit of frustration. Because Jesus called Peter out in front of everyone else and says, "Hey, Peter, before the end of all things, you're going to deny me 3 times. He's probably frustrated. He also probably experienced a little bit of pain or hurt. Because here now at the end, Peter sees his beloved teacher kind of just seemingly give up. And now here at the end, he's probably left with hopelessness. "Peter, put your sword away. I have to do this." Can't imagine Peter's probably wondering, "Well, Jesus, what about the kingdom that you were supposed to usher in?" So because of all these emotions, Peter once again does the wrong thing but for the right reason, I guess. He's foolish, and he rushes into the situation. I mean, think about this. This Jesus, who Peter believes is indeed the Messiah, the one they've all been waiting for, to rescue them from the oppression of Rome. He's the one that's supposed to come and overthrow this great superpower, the greatest the world has ever seen at this time, so that Rome can no longer persecute or control or ridicule anymore. And Jesus finally, he's here. And Peter's thinking, this is the hour where Jesus makes his move. The soldiers are coming out. They're dressed and ready for battle. Jesus knocks them all on their butts with just a couple words. He's ready to go to war. Peter finally, with all these emotions built up, the excitement that now is the time we're going to overthrow Rome, takes out the sword. Whack, chops off an ear. But wait, Jesus tells Peter to stop and put it away. Jesus tells him not to fight? Okay, Jesus, did I get something wrong? Are you not the Messiah that we've been waiting for? It doesn't make any sense. You ever been there? You ever been in a place in your relationship with Jesus where, did I misunderstand it? I don't get it. Herein lies the great challenge and the great invitation. Not only for Peter, but for each one of us. Each of us who desire to place our faith in Jesus. It's this. It's even when it doesn't make any sense to you, can you choose to obey him? Listen, we don't understand his ongoing plans often. And when that happens, it can be really hard, if I'm being honest, to be obedient to Jesus. When I feel like I don't know how things are supposed to play out, or when I feel like things are out of my control, or I'm not sure I understand why he's asking me to do something, it can be really hard to remain obedient. When it doesn't make sense, we tend to have a hard time trusting in the Lord. But I guess that's kind of what faith is. And what's interesting about it is that rarely, if ever, do we understand the plan, right? Now we might think we get it. Peter did. And come to find out that, man, we didn't understand it at all. And when those moments hit, then it gets incredibly difficult to follow. I remember, I thought I understood the plan of when God had called me to plant a church. So my wife and I had gone through about 6 months of prayer and seeking wise counsel, and there were several moments where we had about 7 different people speak into our life that some of them we didn't even know who they were. Just in a radical way. All of them didn't know each other. It was all different points of time over 6 months, told us we should go plant a church. It's crazy. And so I thought, if God's going to call you to do something, you kind of have this picture of what you think it's going to be like. Well, if the Creator calls you to do this, then surely this is going to be like the biggest thing ever, right? This is going to be God's greatest gift short of Jesus this earth has ever seen. So what I did is I started kind of creating this picture of what I thought or expected it to look like. And then what's funny is it ended up looking nothing like that. And even still to this day, I still wrestle with sometimes and wonder why God called us to give up where we were living, the ministry we were part of, the way of life we knew, for this if it didn't go according to plan, my plan. And if I'm honest, I had a hard time trusting God for a little bit because I felt like he failed me. When in reality, What he failed was my expectations of him. You see, I thought I knew the plan, but I wasn't even close. And when my understanding of the plan came crashing down, it became really challenging to continue to trust and obey Jesus. Because when you struggle to trust Jesus, you tend to struggle to obey him. And I think faith is learning to be obedient even when you don't understand the plan. I think faith is learning to trust in Jesus even when all you can see is the end or the failure or, in Peter's case, death. So Peter has a choice at this moment. Will he obey Jesus even when he doesn't understand the plan? Or will he obey his emotions? What's interesting to me is that Peter, you think about this, he could have destroyed everything Jesus had been working for these past 3 years, these past 33 years of his life, with one swing. Had he been 2 inches closer to where he was trying to hit, he would have struck the dude in the middle of the head. Don't think Peter was trying to chop an ear off. Like, that would be incredible precision. But I don't think Peter was like, let's go, get the ears. Like, that's not, I think what he was trying to do was slice the dude. And luckily, Malchus probably dodged, and he missed, and got just the ear. See, Peter wouldn't have listened to Jesus. Instead, if he would have just continued to take things into his own hands, this entire scene would look really different. It's kind of funny to think about. Boy, am I glad I'm not Peter. Right? Boy, am I glad I've never done something kind of foolish like him. Golly. Foolish enough to just rush into life and take things into my own control. You know what I mean? I'm glad I'm mature enough to bathe every aspect of my life in prayer and make every moment obedient to the Father so I never have any issues of my own, right? I'm glad I'm nothing like Peter. Holy smokes. Hope you understand I'm being sarcastic. I think what Jesus says here next could probably apply to each of us. He said, put the sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? Translation, in other words, he says, do you trust me? Even though you can't see it, will you trust him? And if you do, put the sword away. Trust him. You don't need to be in control. He is. Because when we fight to maintain control, not only do we often come to learn that we scarcely even had it begin with, but usually we're failing and we're falling into disobedience. Let me explain this with a question. If Jesus never actually told Peter not to bring a sword or not to use it, as far as we know, Jesus never said those things. Was Peter being disobedient? You see, I think we tend to think about obedience sometimes to Jesus in terms of only his words. We do the things he says to do. We don't do the things he says not to do. Like, Jesus said don't murder, so I try not to do that, right? But he never really said anything about how to act on social media. He never really said anything about following simple traffic laws. He never really said anything about binge watching that new show, right? Here's my point. You can be disobedient even if someone never says not to do something. For example, my second daughter, Wrigley, we were over at some friends' houses, and we were hanging out that evening, and we get back in the van to go back home. And on the way home, about halfway, she says that she has this action figure, this toy. And I said, well, why do you have that? She goes, I wanted it. Like, what do you mean? Like, and she goes, well, it was my friend Denver's. I said, oh, did Denver give that to you? She goes, no, I just took it. Now, to her credit, she wasn't being disobedient to something we had said or not said. To be fair, I never told her not to take anything from Denver's toys, right? I never said you're not supposed to do that. So was she technically disobeying me? Well, she wasn't necessarily disobeying something I had said or not said. And I think this is what Peter kind of falls into here as well. Peter wasn't disobedient to Jesus' words. He was disobedient to Jesus' way. See, Jesus never told Peter not to draw a sword, not to swing it for the fences. It's not that. Peter was disobedient to something. He wasn't disobedient to something Jesus had said. He was disobedient to Jesus' way. And here's what I mean by Jesus' way. See, our response as followers of Christ to suffering, to tribulation, to difficulties, to storms in life and such, our responsibility is to become like Christ in each one of those circumstances. And what did Christ do in those circumstances? Well, he didn't evade. He didn't attack. He didn't speak up for himself. He didn't defend himself. He never tried to prove himself or his past accomplishments. And he was never afraid to be taken advantage of. That's Jesus' way. It's a way of life that makes less of ourselves. It's a way of life that is about laying down our control. It's a way of life that is about turning the other cheek when someone attacks you. It's a way of life that is about giving our coat when someone asks us to wants to sue us for our shirt. It's a way of life that is about going an extra mile when a person forces us to go one. And what's amazing to me about this whole thing is that literally the last command Jesus gave his disciples before this event in the garden. Do you remember what the last command was? It was about Jesus' way. And it seems to have just gone completely over Peter's head here. See, Jesus' way is to love our enemy and to pray for those who persecute you. Just a few chapters earlier, Jesus said this in John 13. He said, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know you are my disciples if you love one another. This is Jesus' way. Love. In every circumstance. There's no qualifier. There's no addendum. He didn't say, love one another unless someone is really mean to you. He says, love one another. Because the way in which you love is how others will know you are my disciples. Love one another. Even when you are taken advantage of, church. Even when you can't see the whole plan. Even when it's really hard to trust Jesus. As followers of Christ, we aren't called to understand the plan. We're called to remain obedient to Jesus' way in all situations. Even when it doesn't make any sense. And his way is a way of love. And this is exactly what Jesus was teaching Peter about faith. To put the sword away. To lay down your control and be obedient to the way of love. Which is what Jesus is about to do. Not just for Peter, but for the entire world. Want to see something that I think is pretty cool about this whole thing? Is that I'll show you this passage. 1 Peter 4, it says this. The end of all things is near. So be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Here's what I think is really cool about this. Do you notice who wrote this? Peter. And he wrote this about 30 years later. It seems like he got it. Above all, love each other deeply. Drop my kids off for school every morning, or they go out the door every morning. Before we say to one another, love each other, and then they say deeply. Obedience requires recognizing that maybe our way of life hasn't really worked out all that great. And maybe Jesus has a better way for us to live. One that isn't about self-love. Obey Jesus' way. It's not about the sword. It's about the cross. It's about sacrifice. It's about dying to yourself. It's about other people. It's about love. That's his way. So let me just leave you with this. Here's some of the final words of Jesus that he gave to his disciples. Maybe I'll just give this to you as well. We'll end here. John 15 says, as Jesus said, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, obey, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You didn't choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you may go and bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. What's the command he says to obey? Love each other.